one time. Oh, thank you for recording. And I'm running into Ken sometimes during training. He is a person that I know that he's very, very focused in continuous learning and sharing to the community. That's why he has a patience to attend every single meetup that he organizes. The topic for his uh, talk today is about how to make a bigger impact on your transformation. And he's going to show what happens under the covers.
Yeah, and this is going to be an interactive thing where we're going to have breakout rooms and stuff. So I just want to make sure you folks are aware ahead of time that we'll be doing breakout rooms. Um, Fernando, do you feel like we're good on setting up the breakout rooms? Are you going to do it now?
Yes. So I do have 6 rooms, rooms of 3.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me go ahead and share screen. And let me, I think what we'll do is after I have a real brief discussion, maybe we'll go directly to breakout rooms, including like a icebreaker if that works, Fernando.
Okay.
Right. Can you folks see my screen?
Yes.
Actually, it's
Mm-hmm.
not the right screen. Give me a second here. Let me do this. Sure, I gave the right screen. Screen.
Yeah, I see your screen. All right.
Okay, awesome. All right, so I think the first thing that I'd like to do is we have a location where I've got some of the exercise and materials that are located for this conversation, right? So we've got a QR code, and I don't know, Fernando or something, can you put that in the chat as well, the link?
Yes.
If you need to, I'll do it, but
I think it's here.
I just pasted it in.
oh, thank
Yep.
you. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Right. So it's kind of give you some exercise and stuff that we're going to do in breakout rooms as we go through this. So let me go ahead and talk to you a little bit first, though. Actually, maybe we'll go directly into breakout rooms. Here's a question to consider with a partner. Now, you're part of a large transformation, right? Consider yourself in that kind of environment. So, what are the challenges and limitations in typical ways that reporting is done and consumed? And why do we want reporting? Like, what do we really want with reporting? What's the purpose of it? Um, so I figure what we'll do is, Fernando, maybe we'll do breakout rooms. I figure we'll do maybe 3 minutes on these topics, but it'll also give them a chance to introduce each other and maybe talk about a job or a hobby or something that people have done. So I'm thinking maybe 3, maybe 4 minutes, if that works.
All right.
If you go where the link is in the QR code, it talks about breakout one and also has these questions in there. So in case you need it, we've got it there as well.
All
So,
right.
all right,
You
let's
tell
go
me
ahead.
when we start.
Yeah, who has questions before we go into breakout rooms about what we're doing?
Could you, I guess for me, it would be helpful to have a little more context when you mean them around reporting.
Yeah, so consider that you're part of a large transformation that may involve multiple different organizations or multiple different areas or even multiple different teams, right? In terms of reporting, what are the challenges and limitations in the typical ways that that reporting would be done? So a lot of times when you're part of a large organization and you've got multiple different things going on in that organization, generally reports are created to kind of give people feedback on what's occurring. And generally those reports are either pulled together or people meet together in a larger group to discuss potentially those reports, or there's somebody that's involved with reviewing them, or maybe not, right? So I'm kind of curious in terms of the organizations and things that you see, what are the challenges and limitations in that reporting, the way that it's consumed, and what do we really want out of that reporting? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that was helpful.
Yeah, Suruchi, you had your hand up as well.
Yes, so similar kind of question. I mean, are we thinking about the reports, means the dashboard, different types of dashboards that we create in order to overall provide an idea around how the team is performing, or how your area is performing, or how your work stream is performing? Are we talking about those kind of reports?
Well, that's for you to figure out in the breakout room. Like what would be effective in that case?
Okay,
Right?
sounds good. Okay.
Yeah. Right. I'm not hearing any other questions. So yeah, Fernando, if we can break people out, that would be awesome.
Before we proceed with the question, with the topic of reporting, we just shared hobbies that very briefly hobbies. Some of our hobbies. One of my hobbies is playing the digital piano, and Matt shared that his hobby is reading a good
Well,
book.
listening to music, so adjacent to
Well, yeah,
annihilate.
listening to the music.
Yeah.
What about one of your hobbies, Aaron?
One of my hobbies. I am really into history.
Okay.
So history across, I mean, just across the world, but I mean, whatever, you could pick one, maybe Russian history or European history, across the last, 1,000 years, basically. So
Very recent history
yeah.
across the last 1,000 years.
Well, yeah, I
Okay.
mean, like back to the feudal, medieval ages with the Hanseatic League, and then, creation of the post-Roman empires in Europe. So, that's like
Nice.
one. But I like history from all over the place. But I would definitely say that history is something I'm interested in.
So unfortunately, it's just 1 minute
Yeah.
left. Let's quickly talk about
Yeah.
reporting challenges
Yeah.
and limitations. What do we want to mention with this regard?
I always think with transformations, it's a question of what do people want to see? Do they know they want to see anything? I think one of the concepts working in the back of my mind is when you're doing a transformation, some people are happy with what we call checkbox agile. Oh, we have teams, they do Scrum, great. Oh, they did quarterly planning, lovely. But what happens after that? And it could be a dashboard, as you've mentioned. It could be a road map, and anything at all. But I think that's kind of crucial. People saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
KPI is day one." So what is the thing?
Aaron, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, typically not typically, almost always, transformations are exclusively driven from the C-suite and above. And so there tends to be a bias of action that their measurements have versus operating or customer.
All right. So I'd love to hear what do we really want with reporting? What are some of the limitations and challenges with it? The typical ways that it's done.
Do you want to hear from each breakout room, Ken?
We don't have to. I'm just kind of curious what came out of some of the comments, though. We don't need to do it by breakout room, but all breakout rooms. But I'm curious.
One of the challenges we came up with was data silos. In large organizations, it is a huge problem.
Yeah. Let's tell me more about that.
From me, or just sorry, do you want me to keep going? That was pretty much all we had time for. It was pretty much, we were listing things that we could think of that would and that one wasn't mine. I stole it.
From our breakout room, I would like to ask Aaron to share. He started sharing, but we ran out of time. So I would like to hear what he had to finish with, Aaron.
Sure. Well, thank you. So, I mean, most transformations are, almost all are C-suite or above led. So they tend to have drivers that are organizational rather than driven by, let's say, market forces around whether a customer or product leadership, et cetera. And so you tend to have a very big mismatch between what people on the ground in the organization experience and have to deliver to every day and are getting run over, and what happens at the executive level and their aspirations, their aims. And I would say that's, I would say consistently that's one of the big drivers that leads to suboptimal transformation performance, let's say.
Yeah.
We also discussed about creating reports or dashboards based on the velocity that team is generating. And then, of course, multiple teams, they all are having some kind of metrics that they are generating and creating the reports, and then comparing the teams' reports and values. I think giving more emphasis to that is not helpful, because every time the velocity count or the statistics or the number is not actually represent the value that customer expects. Not sure that all the PBIs that you have completed include entire value. Maybe out of 90 story points, you have delivered only 50. So, which has value. So the major limitation is how we are considering, what you should be able to understand what is the meaning of value from your customer standpoint. And each and every PBI should be tied to that value, and then that story point would make sense, that velocity would make sense.
Let me ask one more question. I think we just do it here in the room. Let's say that you are a group that's in charge of leading a transformation, right? You're part of a group that's either leading a transformation with a bunch of teams or leading a transformation in a larger organization. What do you think you'd want there for reporting?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say one thing, Ken. I think we're talking a lot about team level metrics, but then there's also like at a transformation level, right? What are the things we need to be thinking about, right? I think, I'm almost thinking like culture. I'm thinking like at the executive level, probably, right? What are the things they want us to focus on, right?
Yeah.
So your question on reporting has had our group a little, maybe we had a few questions on what does reporting mean, right? At that transformation level.
Exactly. And what would you want with reporting out of that, right?
Yeah, I would really say, who are the sponsors of this transformation and what are their goals? That's one thing to think about.
Yeah. Suchi, I think your hand was up next.
Okay, so if we want to think about transformation, and then we want to see which team has been transformed to higher extent, if that is the intent of creating the reports, like, I mean, if we have 10 teams and we would like to see which team has been transformed to higher extent, then maybe agility health radar, those kind of assessments can be executed. I'm not saying that the outcome of those assessment would surely give right reporting or right value around the maturity, because everyone is going to finish that assessment in different state of mind. But overall, in transformation, if there is some kind of questionnaire the team fills in, for example, is your team conducting daily scrum on daily basis? Is your daily scrum happening 15 minutes every day? Those kind of things, granular level, that might be one of the option which will help in creating reporting. But again, I can't say for sure that will give us an outcome that we want.
Yeah, who's going to consume that report? I mean, besides the team, right? Who's going to consume that report and what will they do with it?
And Ken,
So
one of the things that I did have a question about, to that point, it is important when you do have any sort of reporting to determine what is the standard, what is the metric by which you determine success and outcome of the transformation, because you need to be speaking the audience. You need to understand what is the common language of the audience, meaning what do people think, how do you express, your performance based on a communication that everyone will understand who receives that report. The takeoff on that is whether or not the ones who receive that report are willing to listen to the message and the results that reporting is showing. There have been requests where, okay, you showed me the performance. I'm not sure about that data. Can you take a look at that data again and let me know can you just come back to me with a different level of reporting or a different data outcome? Because that can happen when there may be that, as I think somebody mentioned about the C-suite level or organizational level, where they want to change, where they want to report progress when maybe the progress isn't as good as they want it to look like it is.
Yeah. All right, let's do Vivek and Lushana, and then we'll move on after that. So Vivek.
Okay. Thank you, Ken, for the opportunity. And my apologies, folks. My device was not working earlier, so I couldn't have that conversation in the breakout room. If I understood this question right, whether it's transformation or anything else, from a reporting perspective, I think it's important to understand the objective, right, at the level or the executive level or the sponsor level, or so to speak. What is the objective that they're trying to obtain? How will they measure success? So what's the KPI, right, that's associated with that? And then, of course, reporting has to be built in such a way that it essentially, rolls up to that level, right? So there's consistency, to my mind, right, in terms of what is being reported at the highest level is essentially a summary of all the levels below that. Um, I think that's where you see, right, from an executive standpoint, or a manager standpoint, that they will essentially be able to see the traceability and the transparency of how it's rolling up. And the second thing I would say is, action, right? What is the expected action from them coming out of that report? If that's clearly laid out, it just helps everybody make a meaningful use of a report, because typically, right, reports are always about the past, they're not about the future, right? So you have to have an element of the future right into it.
Lushana.
Last year when I was at Marsh McLean, we did a maturity report that had the 6 pillars, and I would show my screen, but it looks like I don't have access to do it. But it would be like an agile CI/CD, business engagement, what tools, organization maturity model, and like the culture. And this would go to C-level execs as use cases, or better yet, the stakeholders sponsoring the agile transformation for their team. So on a monthly basis or every 2 months, they would get the scoring of this report that the team ranked themselves, but it also complements the coaching agreement that I have with the team. So then it'll show your coaching efforts against this maturity model, and that lets you know how long you need a coach to be in the department. So it showed really good value of showing the progress of where they are and then where they want to be. And then we carve a plan for 6 months on it, and they would get this report that show where they are. And then we will focus our time in those areas that was short, and then we'll move on to the next group.
Awesome. Okay. So I have a thought. I think that numeric-based reporting and the type of reporting that we're talking about is important. I think there's another quality of reporting that would also be helpful if we're trying to help a large organization transition. What I'm proposing is, in many large transformations in organizations, it's hard for leadership to determine sometimes where to put their best effort in helping a transformation go along. If you think about it, for a large organization, there's a lot of places that the leaders can put their attention and the coaches can put their attention, right? I think of one organization where I was involved with, where the executive coaches were putting a lot of time into the tactical DevOps reporting, but there weren't really any changes as a result of that, right? There are places where things were clearly needed to change, but there was no direct vice presidential, executive vice presidential level action to resolve or fix anything or to make any changes, and things just move very slowly as a result of that. Has anybody experienced anything like that before?
Mhm.
Yeah, right. So in terms of what we really want with reporting, in my mind, what we want with reporting is action, but action, the right action, the action that makes sense given the context, given the work and process limitations that we have, right? So if we're talking about an executive team of coaches that are trying to work with an organization, where do they put their time and effort to move things along? We're talking about the executives of the organization itself, the C-level, et cetera, or the EVP level, VP level. Where do they put their attention to make sure that they have the right, most effective action? They can't be touching every team, right? That's going to be too much. But there are systemic things throughout an organization that make sense to address. The other thing that I propose is that sometimes looking at the base level reporting, they come up with the wrong action because they don't have the context or the details. Like there are plenty of times I've seen reports that have landed on people's desks and the problems are misinterpreted. They see the numbers and they think it's one thing, but it's really something else that's under the hood. Has anybody experienced that before? A solution that really didn't match the problem?
Right.
Yeah, I'm seeing a few hands nodded, right? Right, so there's a quality of reporting, or quality, I guess you could say, of status reporting that also should be going along with any technical or written reports. That's what I'm proposing, right? And the way that we use that status reporting and the quality of that information, the way that we consume it and make sense of it is important, right? So there we go. Let me kind of talk about one team's or one organization's situation. So I was part of an organization that was holding a large transformation effort, right? There was actually 3 different organizations or 3 different silos, I guess you could say, within the organization that were handling things, right? One was associated with coaching, one was associated with delivery. Actually, there was more than one delivery organization. And there was another one that was, think of it like kind of like a project management office that was kind of managing things, right? And that third organization, from a lot of people's perspective, was holding the transformation up. The transformation just wasn't moving. There weren't any decent plans. There weren't any decent roadmaps. Things weren't moving along the way they thought, right? And that was the perception, right? So we had an organization where we had different parts of the organization that were doing status reporting up. And what we did is we had a conversation about that and kind of dug in with certain questions to kind of open up our thinking about what the information that we're seeing really means. A lot of times what happens, for me at least, is when I see something, I jump to a conclusion about what the problem actually is, rather than digging in a little bit to ask the questions that may open up my thinking a little bit in order to address the problem. So if I'm hearing from multiple different organizations or multiple different people that there's one part of an organization that seems to be holding a transformation up, do I blame that organization? Some questions I get asked surrounding, or some of the realizations that happened in this one meeting I had is, we asked questions about where's the influence? Well, guess what? It's not where you think. It's not this organization that has the power to change that dynamic, right? We also discovered through questioning that the perception around the organization's role is different than what we thought. And actually the responsibility lied elsewhere to solve the problem. They had capacity and bandwidth issues, right? The data played in and showed that. The coaching group that I was a part of they don't own the roadmap output and the outcomes directly, so they can't make any changes there that really need to be done. And there's also a balancing need for centralization versus independence of the individual organizations that were trying to make the transformation out. It was only through asking questions that we figured out those dynamics, right? And we opened up our mind a little bit. The result of that was we realized that as coaches, we need to communicate out regarding this. We did need to use data. We need to acknowledge where the work in process was so that we could address it. We need to make sure that we clarified where responsibility lied with everybody. Everybody thought that it lied with this organization, but it didn't. It was in the delivery organizations actually where the road mapping work should have lived, not in the project management organization, because honestly, the project management organization was a handoff or a place where the work would just sit for a long time, when really it was the directors and the VPs of those individual organizations that needed to address that. So we realized that we need to shift the mentality and the dynamic around that, along with supporting a new leadership group, right? So how do we ask those questions, or what do we do in order to break open our thinking in a way that helps us to reassess and really see truly what may be going on and come up with different ways of thinking, right? Let me show you what we did with a recent organization that I was a part of. First off, here's my introduction information. Fernando already went through it, but yeah, I'm an experienced transformation consultant. I worked with multiple organizations. I've been an agile coach, manager, business solutions manager, project manager, software developer, a whole bunch of things. Even rode ambulance for a while and was a college professor for a little bit. So a lot of different roles I've had. So the reason I'm talking about this is really getting clarity around what is important and stretching our collective meaning-making ability around challenges to help us make sure we're focused on the right effort at the right time as transformation agents, right? Does that make sense to everybody? Who has buy-in on that as a purpose for this? Cool, right? Well, if we think about it, a lot of this has to do with our sense making. I'm going to be referencing a lot of stuff from Michael Hammond. There was a book he wrote called Evolve Agility, and I've done a lot of courses with him. I know, Fernando, you've done a few as well. But he talks a lot about leadership agility and inner agility and mindset, right? So when we talk about reporting and the way we consume the reports, or really anything, right? There's a sensing aspect to it where we're trying to figure out what's going on. That could be data, that could be questions and stuff that we answer, right? There's a way that we make sense of that thing, right? And then we respond. And I think a lot of organizations, they go directly from sensing to responding without taking time to make sense of what's actually happening. And as a result, they got a lot of solutions and a lot of effort that wastes time because you're not really addressing the underlying problem. Has anybody experienced that before? I'm definitely seeing some nodded heads, right? So we want to slow this process down a little bit. Like, we want to separate out the sensing between making sense and then responding, right? I don't know if anybody's heard about the ladder of inference, right? This is what happens inside of our heads, right? We have data that we've got the meanings that we then apply to them based upon cultural and our personal experiences. There are assumptions that play into that, right? And then there are conclusions that I draw for those assumptions. Those are tied to the beliefs that I have. And then based upon my beliefs, I've got actions that I take, right? So what we want to do is start with the data and make sure that we've got that right first, and maybe some of the meanings before we start delving into the sense making stuff up here and slow this process down. This is actually a screenshot from one of the facilitation approaches that we had called liberating structures, called what, so what, and now what, 3 Ws that kind of tie into this work. So there's a different approach that I took with a recent company where basically we did some of slowing this stuff down. So let me show you what we did, what the reporting looked like here. And this is more status reporting than anything else. I need to figure out how to get rid of this so I can actually get the toolbar. Where's my toolbar? Give me 1 second here. I apologize for some other reason. It's not cooperating with me. It always happens when you're in a presentation, right? Try this again. So I disappear and share again. Okay, Lashana, this may look familiar to you. Yeah, basically, so along with other reporting that we did, there was more of a sense-making type of thing that we did. So imagine an organization where we had multiple different sub-organizations where we were trying to do a transformation, right? And then you've got a centralized team of coaches or a centralized team of executives or a centralized team of managers that we're trying to figure out what's really important and what is it that we want to do, right? To make sure that the folks at the top are focusing on the most important things, right? So what we did is we broke down the reporting into gathering things like observations, assumptions, or accomplishments and successes, the human aspect of the touch points. This was a group of coaches, so we want to try to make sure we understood who we were connecting with. The insights that we perceive, the concerns, including the challenge and risks that we had, and then what we intended to do next, right? Then what we did, so every coach or every organization would fill out this section, each one of these sections in there, all right? The larger group was then responsible for, or the executive group here was responsible then for taking the input from these areas, trying to figure out what was most important, and then based upon what we discovered, delving in and asking questions to try to expand our sense making or our meaning making a bit, right? So each one of these reports would then we'd take a subset of that, which each individual thought was important, and we would capture that, right? After we captured the most important things, we would look across all of the organizations that would be involved, and we say, where are the commonalities? Where are the things that seem to have the most energy, or where are the things that have the most impact? For example, at one point, we identified that there were a lot of the organizations that we were working with were talking about roles and getting role clarity, right? So we decided to go down the path of, let's figure out what we're going to do about role clarity, right? Because that would have the most impact because we were hearing it from multiple sections of the organization, right? It wasn't the loudest voice anymore. We're looking holistically, right? Then what we would do is ask questions to kind of define what was going on. We would then ask questions about, hey, how do we make sense of this? Or how can we stretch our meaning in making about that? Then once we were done with that, then we could talk about what our actions would be. And most important, also important, how we would communicate out and what was important to communicate out regarding that. Because I think a lot of the times where leaders drop the ball is on communicating out to the rest of the organization. So who has questions on this approach and what we're doing here?
Can you zoom in a little bit on the top part?
Sure. And by the way, there's a link to this in the material notes as well. So if you want, there's a PDF link in the material on that web page that you can bring up this diagram.
Yeah. So the top part is a bit small on my screen. If you can make it bigger, I cannot read it. Yeah, thanks.
Right.
Just to clarify,
Sure.
Is this being this report being created by the coach, that is coaches in some cases, that's trying to help the organization transform, or is it the folks like the department, so to speak, right, or business units or functions who are essentially doing this understanding, from go ahead.
In this case, it was actually the coaches. So it was a group of executive coaches or portfolio level coaches that were working on this to fill out the different areas. Okay. And I would say that you could do the same thing with the executives or the leaders of each individual organization if you wanted to go that approach. Although I may change some of the questions here. I may not be so concerned about the touch points. That's more of a coaching thing, right? The observations, accomplishments, and successes, absolutely, we want them to give them that. What their insights and concerns were, we want to get that from them as well, right? So it can be used for multiple different roles. In this case, it was for coaching them.
Okay. Maybe I'm jumping the gun, but is the underlying assumption that all the organizations that are participating in this transformation are essentially coming along. They're not most enthusiastically, but they're coming along. What about the resistance, so to speak, right? And the example that you took, right, was a very relevant example from my perspective because of past experience, where the organization that is orchestrating, so to speak, or taking the lead of the transformation does not even want to engage some of the other departments, so to speak, even though their day-to-day work's going to get impacted, right? Because in their mind, they're trying to draw a boundary, which is truly not a real boundary, right? So how do you address that with these kind of tools?
Right. So you're going to see the result of that if you've got a box associated with that group, right?
Yeah.
You'll see what their perspectives are, and then you'll see what the perspectives are of other parts of the organization, right, that are working with them. Like in the example that I gave, we were able to figure out what was going on with that part of the organization because we didn't have one associated with that individual box, but we had another box that we had, which was used to capture some information as well, which was kind of like, hey, what are the coaches observing that are maybe beyond just one of the portfolio areas? But it's just a general recognition that things weren't moving along. And when we kind of looked at and saw, okay, where are the concerns, challenges, and risks, there's a commonality there that had to do with that organization, that project management organization, right? And so we were able to dive into that a little bit and say, okay, what's really going on there? Does that make sense?
It does, right? Of course, if you have an organization, a third party, or whatever, who has that, who can actually capture this, but in an organization where there is no such thing, right? And I typically seen this, right? I shouldn't say typically, but if IT, for example, right, wants to do some transformation, they're basically drawing a box around IT and saying, we're going to do this, but not thinking about what it does to the operation, what it does to the project management, what it does to the other organization. And they're trying to move forward, right? And not even listening, right, to what's happening outside of their box. That's where I think it starts to get very difficult because now executives are getting messages that are very conflicting.
Yeah, and that's a challenge because it's viewed as an IT only transformation. That's not truly the case if you're doing it well, right? Right. So
it should not be. Yeah,
it
should not be.
Yeah, this is one of those cases though where we're trying to do a large transformation in an organization that is touching multiple organizations, and we're trying to make sense of what's going on there. So it may be a slightly different problem that we're solving here compared to what you're talking about. I absolutely see what you're talking about though. Like even within that IT organization, if you tended to have silos there, this could be effective in helping that IT organization. For instance, if you've got a QA silo, if you've got an ops silo, if you have a silo associated with development or some other area, or give me another example. Like let's say you've got an area that's associated with security, right? What are the observations and accomplishments and successes that security organization is doing? What are the insights that they have? What are the concerns that they have, right? And then what are the most important things that those folks are asking to get addressed, right? What are the things that are present for them, right? If you take that and compare that to maybe what the QA folks are seeing, compare that with the development folks are seeing, right? You may find commonalities between all of these things that all point to maybe one or two bigger problems, systemic problems that can be addressed. It may even be that maybe the systemic problem that you're seeing may relate to not communicating well with the business, including them, right? So, right. So trying to make sense of those things is really what we're trying to do, right? So it goes beyond the reporting here. And that's kind of the theme of this presentation is the reporting is not enough. right? It's the sensing and sense making that's important here.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So given that we had the different approach, right? We talked about, you know, the W3, right? The what, so what, now what? Let's talk about what sense making is, right? And this is Michael Hammond who came up with these definitions, right? So sense making is activities by which we mobilize ourselves towards collective action and the beliefs, stories, and emotional triggers usually hidden, which underlie and inform those activities, right? So a lot of times when we're sense making, we're doing it through a lens. Okay, for example, one of the things I saw in that coaching group was, you know, they viewed the challenge through that lens of a coach, right? They viewed the challenge through the lens of one way to solve the problem. Like there was one coach in particular I could think of that always viewed things through a lean lens, right? So the problem consistently to solve had to do with work in process and flow, right? That was generally a lot of the time what they leaned on in terms of their sense making because that's what they were used to. But I can tell you that that wouldn't always solve the problem, right? Having that lean lens may not allow us to see what actually could solve that problem because there may be other areas or other things we can take into account. So what we want to do is break down our sense making a little bit and expand our meaning making, right? So we're doing something called deliberate sense making, and that's a set of practices and distinctions by which we're revealing our beliefs, our stories, and our triggers, which underlie those activities, right? By stretching that allows us to see reality a little bit more clearly, right? It helps us to remove that set of lenses that is stuck to our face and allows us to see things through different views, right? And one of the things we could do to do that is something called shared sense making, right? And the purpose of a shared sense making conversation is to expose the meaning making structure and the activity as a group to kind of remove those distortions or remove those limitations that we have that can cloud our understanding of what's actually going on. So we can come up with better actions as a result of that. Part of this ties into what's called vertical facilitation. Vertical facilitation actually goes beyond the simple in the meeting moment, but allows us to expand our meaning making as a whole. So what we want to do is maybe with that leadership group, we want to help them to expand their meaning making, not just in the meeting, but on an ongoing basis to stretch their meaning making, the way that they think about things, right? And what we talk about is an outer goal, right? Which is maybe working towards understanding, adjusting appropriately as a group, right? But there's an inner goal of stretching our meaning making and our mindset so we can then see more options, more possibilities aligned with the values and things we want to achieve. And this all ties to the point that Lily Tomlin quote, really, reality is really nothing but a hunch, right? We don't really know what reality is. So what we're trying to do is have all the information in one place along with the people who can speak to it. Our goal is to distill what's important, capture the places where people need to be made aware, what will be shared with others in the next steps. And we want to do this as a group to capture the information and have somebody who can focus on facilitating that conversation in such a way that it opens up the meaning making. And that's what we're going to practice and talk about tonight. I threw a lot at you. Who has questions before we dive into the next area?
I have a quick question.
Sure,
And my apologies if you have already covered the answer, but I'm trying to find where exactly we can apply all these three strategies like sensing and those things. Is it at organizational level, at broad level?
Yeah, we can apply that in our individual lives. We can do that because I'm doing it a lot right now. Kind of reassigning my own meaning making processes. We can do it at a personal level through coaching. But in this case, we're talking about doing it at a large organizational level. We're talking about doing it with a group of leaders or a group of coaches or a group of executives, a group of managers that are all trying to make a change and expanding their ability to think about things in different ways, to see different possibilities and how to solve and what a problem could be and how to solve that problem. Does that make sense, Sarushi?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ken, is it okay to think about this? Is this concept akin to, what we typically, see in behavior science or behavior economics, which is about, the biases that we have, right? The recency bias, right? So as an example, right? So if you're sensing something, we typically go to whatever's a recent one and then react to it, right? Rather than thinking about 5 other times the same thing happened, but the outcomes were different. Right? Is that akin to the concept? Okay.
It is, yeah, because I mean, we lean upon, we all have an inner set of programs or lenses or things that we view things through. And that's great because it creates, if you get a whole bunch of people in a room, that creates a diversity of thinking, right? Which is awesome. But if we rely upon those lenses, our individual lenses too much, we tend to miss things. And actually, I'm going to go back real quick to, I'm still sharing screen. So let me go back to this slide and kind of revise something slightly. Just a little bit of a concept here. This doesn't quite represent what actually happens. Because some of that making sense occurs as you're sensing. And what you sense ties to what you're sensitive to. So that kind of talks about the bias that you're talking about, right? Where really I sense what I expect to sense sometimes rather than what's actually going on. So it's helpful to ask questions about what's really going on and kind of break that pattern to prevent those biases from impacting us. Does that make sense? Does that align with what you're talking about?
Yeah. I'm just trying, I guess in a way, right? I'm trying to make sense by relating to what I know. So it's like
That's great.
sensing and making sense, right? So that's where I'm trying to go as well.
Right. So we're going to practice a little bit of this, right? So I was thinking what we do is do breakout rooms where we're going to get into, we'll go back with our groups of 3. And what we want to do is have one person be the facilitator, kind of ask questions, or one person actually volunteer with some sort of issue or problem or something that they're facing or something that they want to go deeper on, right? We're going to have one person facilitating and asking questions. And we're going to have one person just observing the interactions, all right? So how do we do this? Let me kind of show you what the questions that we're going to ask are going to be. And then we'll talk about, again, the breakout rooms and everything like that. So we're going to start with observation questions. Again, we're trying to slow down our minds a little bit. So the questions are like, what are we observing? Now, keep in mind, these prompting questions really are meant for a group, but because you're doing it with just one person, you may want to change the way like it's not what are we observing, it's more what are you observing, right? Because it's a single person. Keep in mind this applies to groups, but we can practice it one-on-one, right? So what are we observing? Like, what are the commonalities that we see amongst different organizations or different things? What information do we have? Where can we get more information? Who can we speak to? What are the facts? What are the fact patterns or set of facts that exist? What are we observing? What are the communication patterns and interactions that we see? Who have the loudest voices and the softest? What are we missing? You can see this is really based upon trying to sense what's going on rather than make sense of it. All right, who has questions about these questions and what we're trying to do with the first breakout? Okay.
So I have a question. Do you think, Ken, we definitely need to go into breakout rooms like in pairs, or maybe we can just split into 2 breakout rooms with 4-ish people in each one?
Yeah, we were going to do 3 in each one. If that works.
I had to I had to make some changes, but we have three groups, 3 rooms with 3.
Okay, awesome. Great.
Mm.
All right. So on the website or on the web page that I put together, actually, if you want to use that in your breakout rooms, we could share there. If you look under second breakout, observing questions, this talks about, the focus person who's going to come up with an issue or challenge, the observer, what they do, what the facilitator does. Okay, and these are the sample questions to ask. You can ask other ones also associated with observation or helping the person to consider what they observe, right? And then we'll take just a minute or two at the end to kind of talk about what happened as these questions were asked. Who has questions on what we're doing?
Sounds good.
All right, let's go ahead and put folks into breakout rooms again then. And I think we'll do, let's do 4 minutes this time.
All right.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Hey guys again.
Hi, how you doing? Sorry, I'm cooking right now. I'm almost done.
Okay.
So I'm listening though. I have my headset on. Don't worry.
Okay,
I'm
so
watching.
because you are cooking, maybe you can be the focus person looking at the page. Focus person is the one who picks a challenge or issue or even a success they would like to dig into more deeply, honoring confidentiality. And then let's also pick the facilitator and the observer. I can be the facilitator, and then Matt, you will be the observer if that's fine with you guys.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Aaron, you are picking a challenge then.
Okay, so a challenge is, and it's built around the reporting, right? That's what the challenge is that we want to have.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Reporting was there in the beginning just to show that sometimes we are reporting on things without even understanding deeper levels of what's going on. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I'll stay with that theme, which the rituals of reporting and the cascading of those reports without understanding what should be measured, what should be acted on, and what should be prioritized within those reports or that cascading reporting. And whether that's an agile, Scrum-friendly operating environment or not, because not every participant in that process is part of the agile Scrum architecture anyways, right? So in the end, the lowest common denominator often overtakes it, which is, tell me what's going on in the project, WBS, give me a project report, blah, blah, blah. And then the cascading obviously is triggered from that. Does that make sense? The challenge?
To me, it does. If I try to place it into like my professional environment, it does. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, I think that is one of those things that people need to be clear on. And whether people are participating or not is another part of it. I think it's definitely something where it shouldn't be selective. Everyone should be leading in. But
Okay, so as I am a facilitator, I will be asking all of us questions that feel the most relevant. Feel free to come up with similar questions related to observations, facts, and so on. Questions are designed for groups with multiple perspectives. We do have multiple perspectives because each of us has a different situation. Change the questions from we to I. What commonalities do I see? What information do I have? Where can I get more information about what is happening? So I'm not exactly sure how to translate these questions to the topic, but maybe I can ask a little bit slightly different question. So you mentioned, Aaron, rituals of reporting, cascading. in my organization where we serve a client, we do have some discrepancies because between what the executives expect to see versus what the developers look at on a daily basis. And indeed, what should be measured may be a question here. So how to translate that into these questions that I'm a little bit lost. What commonalities do we see?
I would, if
Go
I
ahead.
could, pick one. The one word on that page that I think we could all talk about a bit is patterns. I think we're all talking about a gap, whether it's, senior level, developer level, or started a transformation and then 6 months in, people didn't know where to go, or people wanted to send an alert or pivot, and other people didn't. So I think the question is, what is the overarching pattern?
Patterns.
Is it starting out with something undefined? Is it starting out with a very specific set of constraints and then not meeting them? For me, in my experience, it's been a very much, starting out with recently checkbox agile. Okay, we're doing Scrum, great. We had some quarterly planning, yay, we're done. And that's really not it. You don't really grow a program that way. So I think that's really, for me, the question: what is the pattern we see? Whether it's no expectations, too much, something in between. I'm sure everyone has an organization or one experience that fell anywhere in that scope. So I think that's really the big one that I would take away and share with everyone. I've been in a situation where the beginning was undefined. So I know Aaron has different stories about what the success metrics might have been where he's been. But I think that's really the thing, if I had to share with anyone. Everyone should know the same thing about, what are we looking at, and, what is the signal to pivot or time?
That's right. And why? And like why, what's the why? Answering the why is really important. Oh, we have 3 seconds. Oh well.
Was that a micro 4 minutes?
What's that?
Was that a micro 4 minutes? It went like popcorn in the microwave. It went so quick.
It did. It did.
Went quick. Honestly, we extended it to 5, believe it or not. We went longer than 4 minutes. We went longer than 4 minutes.
Okay. Maybe with some of the technology, when you get in there, with okay. All right.
I hear your feedback though, Luciana. Go a little bit longer in the breakouts. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
That's what you are sensing.
Can't know we operate on transparency.
Love it.
I typically listen to webinars on 1.25 or 1.5 just to save on sometimes. I guess we need the breakout room to be 0.75 instead.
Oh yeah.
I've learned working with Luciana, when she has something to say, you better dang well listen, because she's got it going on. So we will make the breakout rooms longer. I promise. What was that?
No, I just said thank you. No, as soon as we got into the groove, like after the first one, I think we were kind of like, okay, we could do this. Then the breakout room said, you're going back. I'm like, oh, okay.
All right. So we talked about what we're observing, right? So we did that first section. We kind of delved in a little bit about the sensing, right? So what comes after that is the sense making, right? So really our intent here is to go deeper and challenge our way, not just challenge our idea about the problem, but challenge our way of thinking, right? It goes beyond the simple, hey, let's look at this from a different point of view, right? We're trying to expand the way that we think about things, right? And a great quote by Wayne Dyer: if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I've noticed that within myself, that there are times when people ask me those challenging questions that I suddenly see things from a completely different point of view. The way I've heard it described is, we've got a record, like we have records going on in our head that for those who remember what records are, right? and the needle's kind of stuck in a groove. And what we're trying to do is take that needle and scratch the record up a little bit, because we want to go in different directions. We don't want that same music in our head to play every single time we see something, right? We're trying to expand the patterns that we see. We're trying to expand the way we view things and think about things. So what we want to do next is ask sense-making questions, right? And some examples of those would be, what might this be telling us about the organization or about us? As we think about the topics, what assumptions might we have? What might a different perspective believe? What are the beliefs that inform us or that informing our opinions, right? How is this a problem? How is this tied to our deeper mission, right? So there's a whole bunch of questions or sense-making questions that we can ask to expand our thinking, right? Got a whole bunch of them here that are meant to do that. And again, they're on the website. So in response to Luciana, we're going to break out into the same triads, same group as before, same topics, same facilitators, same roles, right? And what we want to do is ask sense-making questions. And just, again, the facilitator, just pick what you think is relevant or come up with your own if you've got your own that help people expand their thinking. And I think based upon Luciana's input, let's go with 6 minutes. Fernando, what do you think for the breakout? Before we do that, who has questions on what we're going to do? All right, let's go ahead and put them back out in breakouts then. You're on mute,
Fernando, you're muted if you are saying anything to us.
Here we go.
Okay,
Right.
so
Again,
yeah, so we identified the issue, which is we're seeing same patterns again and again. And now we want to to make sense of those patterns. Once again, can you reiterate, Matt, what exactly the patterns are that we are seeing?
sure. I think overall we're talking about in a transformation that there's some reporting gap, whether it's C-level stakeholders over here, people on the teams over here, coaches over here, that, this is a bad one, but I think we've all heard the story metaphor of the three blind people and the elephant. They're in the woods, in the jungle, the elephant walks by, one's feeling the ear, they say it's like paper, the other's propping the side, they say it's like a big wall.
Okay, yeah. So it's a discrepancy in,
right.
yeah.
I think if we had to pick a sample question, I think some of these, for some of the sense-making ones, it's a very long list. Maybe we want to pick one or two.
It is.
I think this is, without being super vertical, if I had to pick one thing there, it could be about our assumptions.
Yeah, I'm also liking this one. Yeah. And maybe let me ask Aaron this time. Aaron, on this topic of these emerging patterns that we all observe in our organizations about the discrepancy in what the higher ups want to see versus what they actually see and how the interpretations are different. What would you say our assumptions might be?
Well, so I think the fundamental challenge is large, highly matrixed organizations have very differentiated incentives and objectives that struggle to have continuous alignment. And so when you overlay any system-wide change, whether it's a regulation, it's a transformation, it's a merger, it just doesn't matter, right? Like then all of those matrices cells or groups of them, clusters, collide because their design, they do not have design principles that are aligned with whatever those overlays are, the waves. Like we can think of it as like the ocean waves hitting it, and it's sort of like the sand, and then we're coming in making all these matrix sand castles
I
and
see.
the ocean's
Mhm.
going to do what the ocean does. And so that's the challenge. And when people are locked in to career paths and patterns that are around the matrices, then that is their incentive. It doesn't matter. We could sit there and say, I have CSAT, MPS, CES scores up the wazoo that say we're disconnected.
Got your
They're going to
point.
say,
Got your
you
point.
know,
Yeah, got you.
you know,
So the next question is, maybe Matt, I will ask you, what might a different perspective be? We're like moving towards the finding the solution at the very early stages of it.
I think again, I understand Aaron's point that, because of incentives and things like that, how our org is set up, it does hold back transformation. And occasionally transformation does say eventually we have to redo the org to make this work better. That's the far end of the spectrum. I think the early stages is really a question of what are we looking for. And again, I think people coming out of certain different ways of working, think like the answer is one and done. Okay, this is the answer for the next 6 months. This is the answer for the year. And I think it has to be framed, okay, what are we looking for now? What's the sign saying we're moving forward? There could be 10 different reasons for a group. But I think having that conversation to say, hey, what is that process? What's the shared purpose has to happen? And acknowledge the fact that things are not going to be completely aligned. I think a lot of the problem that people get hung up over is, oh, we're looking for reports that are aligned. No, we're looking to see we're being coherent. I think my 2024 word is alignment, is great for the last 10 years, but it's not realistic. I think coherence is better. I think Aaron might be nodding his head, especially in a big org. I think that's really the vague North Star that people need to
yeah,
look
no,
for.
that's a fantastic point, actually.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I'm
Thank
stealing
you.
that one for my meeting in 12 hours.
Okay, well, good luck with that. But I think some of the things about, the sense making is really stopping to say, and I know it's a deeper subject if you know about it from other groups. It's a lot of input and it's a lot of saying, where are we going? And depending on, again, scope and time and people, you don't have a 3-day sense making effort. But I think you could definitely do these, quick run and gun. Okay, hi, we have a gap, we're doing something, we want to show reporting. How do we want to show, and there could be 5 different perspectives. So let's pick 3 to start with and just acknowledge we're not locked in and go, okay, in 2 months, we might see that some of these are wrong and we'll learn.
So we are approaching the closing of this breakout room again. I want us to get to the point where I can ask the question, what was the impact on the person who brought this challenge, which is Aaron? How did you like our conversation so far? Of course, very brief, but what was the impact?
No, it was great. I mean, I do, by the way, fantastic facilitation. Appreciate that. You're really very good in just the way you have flow and repeat the questions without making it sound like you repeat the questions like most people who repeat the questions do, like I do. So thank you so much. I would say the big thing is coherence. I mean, that's the big takeaway, is that accept as much coherence as you could take and then just build from there. So appreciate it.
Okay. So after we do that, after we've done the sense making, generally the next step that we take, right, is how do we respond, right? So given all this, what's an experiment we want to try? What might our hypothesis be and how can we test it? How do we communicate out our decisions and reasoning? What are our next steps and who is accountable, right? So it's all those things that we typically would ask at the end of a session or meeting to make sure that we've got some sort of action that's coming out of this, or set of actions or set of communications that we've got, right? normally, time permitting, we would pop into the third and final breakout room. How many people are interested in just kind of closing it out and kind of doing some conversation instead? Like, I'm kind of curious, how many people actually would want to do a third breakout for these next steps? So
I
the way
would
that we
I would rather, if it's not many of us, if we stay here and exchange the takeaways from our
Yeah.
breakout rooms.
That was my thought too. Yep. I just want to see if there was a burning desire to kind of close out the stories and all that. So I'm good. All right, so we're going to skip the next breakout. That was time permitting anyway. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you folks. How was the experience? What did you pick up from it? Like what, especially for those folks that were observing, what did you see?
That's a great question. I also wanted to ask this question in our breakout room, but I didn't have enough time for that. So maybe I can use this chance. Matt was our observer. And Matt, maybe you could, if you don't mind, share what did you see as an observer?
As an observer, again, kudos to you for facilitating once again. But you kept everything on track. I think as an observer, the way the work on the webpage was formatted was really good. And I think it could be applicable to a lot of people in their org. Everyone has at least one challenge, if not 5 or 10. And I think, using that as the way to pilot it, it could be something even within you're looking at, you within a small group, you within a bigger team. And, everyone can name the challenge. I think really from there, it's a question of figuring out, getting to the point maybe where there is some sort of sense making within the group. Just saying, what is the assumption? What is the thing that we're trying to work from? Within our group, we stuck within reporting, and we were talking about, depending on your transformation and where you are, different people in the group, C-level folks, developers, coaches in between, all have different view of what should be reporting on. Where are we? Where are we going? And I think that gap was the trigger for us to talk about how even in any group, you could start looking at some of the things, what do you expect to see? And use sense making to apply it there. So that was our experience. And, observing it, I think it had a very good flow, and it's a good takeaway document. So thank you, Ken.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For the person who were you talking or who were you working with?
We had Natalie and we had Aaron in our group.
Aaron, well, I'm kind of curious, like what was the impact of the questions on you?
They were, they were great. They were thoughtful, and was able to figure out, almost like in a vector where I was going to relative to where I was. And then that is really, I'd say the sign always of a great facilitation and the tight alignment. And given the, very, very tight constraints in terms of the time we've been together the last hour, that's, yeah, that was great.
Who else wants to share an experience or thought on how this went?
I can go a little bit, right? So I was the person who, with the problem statement, the first person, right? So we couldn't finish a lot of the conversation that we wanted to do. But I think the thing is, right, by having some of this conversation, by having some of these questions, you do tend to start to, maybe shift your thinking a little bit, right, about other perspectives or other other venues, so to speak, which may not happen if you're just sitting by yourself or thinking about it yourself, right? So it does have, the conversation does help. It just shift, and hearing another perspective, or even the question, can open up some options and thinking about where to go next.
Yeah, awesome. Share screen. So again, here's the premise of this whole conversation, right? By paying attention to how you manage information, the questions you ask, and establishing a collective sense-making approach, you can better react to the challenges an organization faces in its transformation, right? It's by stretching ourselves and by truly understanding what's going on, and by having a mechanism where we can sense what's going on across the organization, identify what's most important, we're able to make a better impact and spend our time in a way that's better. Right? For more sources and how to, for more sources that kind of played into this, there's the W3 and Liberating Structures website. And these sources are also on that page that you guys worked with the questions and everything on it, the webpage. So I don't feel you need to copy this down or anything. It's all on that page. And then the Evolve Agility book by Michael Hammond. I got a lot of stuff, not just from his book, but from conversations and cohorts and stuff that I got from him. And in closing, quote from Albert Einstein, right? Learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. The most important thing is not to stop questioning. Thank you. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you folks playing in. Any additional feedback you folks have before we wrap up the call? I'd love to hear it. What worked for you? What didn't?
Thank you so much, Ken. Like what did not work, I second Luciana. Breakout rooms were too brief.
Too short.
Too short,
okay.
yeah. But what did work, I like the format when the talk intersperse with breakout rooms, and then there is a little bit of a talk again. I like this format.
Thank you.
What I would suggest, maybe more examples to get our thought on the right track.
Okay.
Luciana, is there anything you would like to share? Any feedback besides it being too short?
No, I'm good. Thank you. You did a good job, Ken, as usual.
Thank you, Luciana. Thank you, Luciana. I appreciate it. I miss working with you, Luciana. I really do.
I know, me too. Me too.
All right. Thank you all for the time that you spent with me, and I hope this is effective and helpful for you. I'm going to keep that webpage up for at least the next month or two. So, feel free to kind of use this in your own organizations or even in your own life. I would love to hear the impact on it if you try to use it out in organizations. All right. So feel free to reach out to me. I stuck my email address and everything on the page as well. I'd love to hear if you experiment with this outside of this. I'd love to hear about it, and I'd love to hear what the impact is. One thing I do caution you with or suggest strongly is if you use this in an organization, you are helping to stretch people's minds. Be direct about that these questions, may lead to places that people aren't used to going, and try to make sure that you've got buy-in on that, right, with them. That's important. So, all right.